Greetings. Boy, have I got a special one for you today. We're going to be interviewing none other than Dave Marsh. Now, Dave is going to be responsible for Shadowgate VR, which is coming out on the Oculus Quest October 7th. All the details can be found in the description below. Now, Dave is a bit of a legend when it comes to gaming and development because he created, along with Kal Torlin, he created the original Shadowgate back in 1987 on the Apple Mac. And this game has been ported so many times to the Amiga, the Atari ST, to the NES, to the Game Boy Color, because it's such a classic fantasy game. And so in this interview, I talk about Shadowgate VR, but I also talk about Dave's history and the origins of Shadowgate. Now, this interview goes for about 20 minutes because of this. Now, I personally find the history of Shadowgate, along with Dave's journey as a developer over the years, to be fascinating. But if you just want to get into the Shadowgate VR content, including some exclusive content that you might not have heard anywhere else that Dave has generously talked about in this video, then you can do that by just going to the timestamps below. I've timestamped it so you can skip to the part that you want to hear about most. Anyway, with that, let's check out the interview. I know you've had a pretty solid development history working on different games over the years. So maybe we could start with that, just in a nutshell, you know, where you started, some of the things you've worked on and how you came to be where you are now.
Yeah, so I started off in 1985, met a friend at church who was a programmer for a game called Deja Vu and Nightmare Comes True for the Apple Macintosh 128K. And I had done some pixel art on an old like Tandy computer, Radio Shack computer back in the day. And I showed him that. I was a big fan of, I played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons and big fantasy fan. And so I convinced them somehow, the company, which is called Icon Simulations, convinced them to lend me one of their sacred Macs. And I, myself and my colleague Kal Torlin, we were just designing the game in my parents' bedroom of my parents' house, and just started creating Shadowgate, which was this fantasy game. I think at that time it was called Tarragon, maybe. It was Shadowkeep for a while. Anyway, we settled on Shadowgate, and we did that on the Mac, and it did really well. And so we ended up porting that artwork, Carl and I, to the Apple II and Commodore Amiga and Commodore 64 and Atari ST and PC, EGA, CGA, VGA, all that. And and then went on to work with Chemco on the NES versions, which are the most popular, the NES Shadowgate and Uninvited and Deja Vu. Worked on those, and then went off to work on some side scrollers for Warner Brothers, Roadrunners, Death Valley Rally, and Daffy Duck Marvin Missions, and Bugs Bunny Rabbit Rampage. And so worked on that for a while, and then got bought out by Viacom, and yeah, so that was interesting. And then went on to I moved to Virginia, and I started making massively multiplayer games based on Aliens and Starship Troopers and Godzilla and other things. Yeah, and then and then in 2012, I reacquired the rights to Shadowgate and Deja Vu and Uninvited and some of the Sherlock Holmes mysteries. Kickstarted Shadowgate, and that went well, and then put that game out in 2014, and that's kind of how I got back into working with these franchises. So it was pretty fun.
Yeah, it's amazing how things start off. You're so small and then can grow into, 15 port stretching decades. It's amazing how it happens. And just for anyone watching who might not be too familiar with Shadowgate, sort of in your own words, what is Shadowgate all about?
Right. It's Shadowgate initially is the first first-person fantasy adventure game ever, and it was a brutal game. And it's first person point and click adventure, puzzle solving, moving from room to room, looking through the player's eyes, and it was all about you kind of being a chosen one and going into what we call the living castle of Shadowgate and defeating a guy called Talamar the Warlock Lord. And it's a very simple premise, because I mean back at that time, a lot of the games where it was simple, the plots. And so, yeah, so, on the Mac, it was all about windows. This was a new thing, right? Where you could have an inventory as one window and a command system, look, examine, eat, take, hit, all those operate, all those types of commands. And then you had different menus for being able to move, and you had the main, area, and it ported actually very well to the NES. And so, yeah, so it's a first-person fantasy adventure game, and but the thing that people really liked about it was you die a lot in the game, and we had a lot of fun with that. So when you died, we were very descriptive in humorous ways because with a point click adventure game, if there's a window, you should be able to jump out of it, right? Or if there's a sword, you should be able to impale yourself, or whatever it is. If you want to light yourself on fire with a torch, you're going to do it. So we had a lot of fun with that. So yeah, that's pretty much what it is.
We know that the original game was a point and click adventure series, and I can see from the trailer that's out there already that it's quite a bit different. I can see that, for example, you can potentially raise your shield to block fireballs, or I think in one scene you were going hand over hand on a rope to climb across, which seems like you're using the motion controllers. I would expect to do that kind of stuff. But sort of in your own words, how different is the VR version going to be to
Well, if you think about the point and click version, let's just talk about it. Let's talk about the courtyard where there's a Cyclops, right? In the original one. The original one, there's a Cyclops at the end of the courtyard, and you needed a sling, which I think you picked up in room 2 or something. And you needed a rock, which was from something else. And so you put the rock in the sling, and then you come up to that Cyclops. And if you use rock on sling and then use sling on Cyclops, you'll knock the Cyclops down, right? So really, all we're doing is letting you do that in real time, right? And so all adventure games are basically key lock games, right? It's I get the right key, and it's whether it's a physical key or it's an orb of destruction or it's whatever the object is that you need. In this case, the key would be the sling with the rock, and then the lock is whatever I'm going to go ahead and use that on to go ahead and complete the puzzle, right? And so I think that when it really comes down to it, it's still an adventure game. There's still puzzle solving, and the vast majority of the puzzles are real world puzzles, right? They're not moving this brick down and over and blah blah blah, right? So it definitely is more of an action adventure now. We lived outside Chicago, and I had a friend who introduced me to Dungeons and Dragons, and it had just come out in the '70s. And so we weren't very far from Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, where D&D was created. So his mom every now and then would take us there, and we would go to this place called the Dungeon, which was Gygax's store, right? Gary Gygax's store. Every now and then we'd see him in there. We didn't know who he was. We were just kids, right? We didn't know this guy's legend, right? And we would buy lead miniatures and all the paints, and and all they had at that point was Dungeon Master guides and screens, and this is the first ones. And I remember playing D&D and drawing, because that's where I started drawing stuff. And I always thought, wouldn't it be great to be inside of a real dungeon? And so when I got a chance to work on Shadowgate at the beginning, this was as close as I was going to get first-person adventure game where I feel like I'm in a dungeon. And of course, the screen size was, I don't remember what it was, 150 pixels by 100 pixels or something, right? You had very, very little to work with. But that's what I always wanted to do. So when I tried on the Vive and I played Vader Immortal and I saw how they constructed it, and we just deconstructed it and looked at it and just said, what is this doing and how are they doing it? And after working on in 3D on Argonus, we had gotten our feet wet there. And I just said, what you really want to do is walk through a dungeon here, and not just any dungeon. I don't want it to be toon shaded. I don't want it to be, pixel. Although there's some very good, like Ancient Dungeon, I think is a great pixel game. Kind of an 8-bit game, but I really wanted to feel like what I thought of when I was, I don't know how old I was, 12, 13 years old, playing D&D and going to and being actually inside of something that felt very, very real. And so, of course, we had to pick the Oculus Quest, which I love, but it comes with restrictions, right? And we wanted to support both the Quest 1 and then ultimately the Quest 2. So the interesting thing was, as we're playing it, playing games and going through it, I thought, and I got Carl Ruloffs again, my partner in crime, as far as business and stuff goes. And I just, we talked and he wanted to be on board. And I just said, this is really no different than us making a game on floppies or on a cartridge. We just have to go ahead and work within a different constraint. And this constraint is draw calls and real-time lights that you can handle and everything that's in part of that headset. And so for 9 months, we just kept trying. We did a 5-room demo, and we tried different things. The first room was some obelisks that you shot, and then you had a puzzle on the door that you had to open up based on that. And then we did a room that was very, very dungeon, like with some attacking spiders and stuff. And how did that feel? And then we did one with which was more of an escape room like bit. And then we did another one that was at least more of that. And then we started playing around with minecart rides. What would that be like if we're inside of some sort of like dwarven mine? And so we put together this 5-room demo and we just kept playing it and said, what's the fun? What's the fun part here? And what is the expectation? Because if the expectation is from the player that it's going to be, I'm going to be in one room and I'm going to be in an escape room, then they're not going to get the rest of the game. They're not going to be able to get towards Shadowgate. So we did this demo and for Oculus, and the things that came across were 3 things. One was combat was a lot of fun, and so we gave you a wand, and we just thought that would be a lot of fun to do that, and so we made you a sorcerer in this game rather than like a warrior. We said, okay, that's really fun. Combat's really fun, and but it's not. Shadowgate isn't all about combat. But if you look at Shadowgate, like the original Shadowgate or the 2014, there's a lot of monsters in it. There's a lot of stuff. It's just solved with one click, right? So we looked at it. And we just said, what's the fun parts? And so combat was a lot of fun. But then we said, look, this is an adventure game. So what are we going to do for our adventure? And he said, well, let's make sure there's a lot of fun things to pick up, and there's a lot of keys in the game that you can find, and let's do some fun puzzles, and then let's do some environmental puzzles where you have to move things around perfectly in the right way to solve it. And then we thought, well, that's a lot of fun. And then we did this minecart ride, and I was taken by. Did you play Vader Immortal?
Yeah, played all 3 parts.
Yeah, and so we were just taken by, hey, the part where I'm on a skiff or something and stormtroopers are coming in, it can be pretty fun. What would that be like in a dwarven mine? So we said, let's do that as well. Let's make sure that the experience builds so you're learning along the way, but the rooms feel very different. Just like the Shadowgate rooms always felt different when you walked in from one to the next. And so where a normal dungeon crawl, especially like a procedurally generated one or anything, all the rooms feel the same. But let's not do that, because Shadowgate, you had a cold room next to a hot room, next to a lava room, next to this. Some of it didn't make sense, but people were like, you know what, this is fun anyway. So we added more narrative to that. So we did that demo and then sent it to Oculus. And it's tough to get noticed at being a small a small indie, dev. Um, but eventually, they got back to us and said, "This is great. We really like what you're doing here." And I said, "Look, I really like what Vader Immortal did with smaller games. Could we do multiple Shadowgate games?" And so that's why this is Shadowgate VR, Mines of Mythrok, book one of the Shadowgate Saga, because we're going to follow it up with the next game, and then the next game, and then hopefully continue. And then part of that was to get a gauge on players. What's your favorite part? What are the things that are make you most happy playing a Shadowgate VR? And then we'll build on that in the second and third one or whatever.
When it comes to Shadowgate VR, what are you most excited for players to get their hands on? What most excites you about this game, and what do you want players to most experience about it?
No, I think the thing that excites me the most is what I mentioned earlier, is that when I was a kid, I wanted to be inside of a dungeon, and that's exactly what it is. I can stand for hours, maybe not hours, but I can stand for a long time and just fire a fireball down a hallway and just watch it light up the arches, and I just giggle because it's so much fun, and to just feel like I'm in there. And with the Quest, to be able to go ahead and not only do full 360, but also be able to walk around inside the area is just it's just awesome. So it doesn't matter, if you're a D&D fan or just a fantasy fan in general, or you read Lord of the Rings or you watched Game of Thrones, all of that is epic. I mean, looking at a dragon that's 60 feet tall or 70 feet tall, and in front of you and running from it is just it's just amazing. So I think that's what it is. And I don't know how many Oculus Quest folks are going to know what Shadowgate is. I mean, Shadowgate certainly does have a good fan base, but it's certainly not Star Wars, right? And so we're doing our best to make a game that Shadowgate fans like, but also just people that like fantasy, that always said, I want to walk through a really realistic dungeon. I want to really feel like I'm there, and one that isn't, it's not the same hallway over and over and over again. Wow, what is this room? I've never seen anything like this. So I think that's the thing I'm looking forward most to hearing from players, what they think of that. And and then again, the Shadowgate players, I'm hoping that they look at it and say, yeah, this takes, it used to be that I clicked hit, and I clicked the goblin, and that's how I knocked out the goblin. Well, now, I've got, this wand, and I can do all these different things with it. And, that's how I'm going to defeat the monsters.
Are there any sort of exclusives you can give us? Anything? You've already said some things that I didn't know about. I'm not sure I've seen on any website or anything like that. But are there any other sort of exclusives you can give us about this game that?
So as far as exclusives go, I would say that the one thing I really didn't talk about it is the game. The original Shadowgate was pretty much, you do the right thing and you move on. You do the wrong thing, you're going to die. And certainly there are insta deaths in the game. If you launch yourself off a cliff, that doesn't bode well for you, right? But we did add some RPG elements to it, which I think that good combat is going to help with. So you had mentioned a shield. You do have a shield. You pick up this orb, kind of partway through the game. You can use that. You can power up the shield so that it lasts longer. You pick up potions that will, different sizes potions that will go ahead and give you back hit points. So you do have hit points. Monsters do have hit points. And so it does have that RPG element to it that I think it needs, that every time, if a plasma bolt hits you, it's going to kill you. If you jump off of a bridge, it's going to kill you, right? And then we have lots of save points. There's save points in every room. So just like Shadowgate, where, right, the original McVenture, where you can save the game at any time, you can save it. If I solve this part of the puzzle, I'll save it. I can solve this part of the puzzle, I'll save it. I think that's one of the things that players really loved, right? That they could save it at any time, and then, if they died, okay, that's okay. I saw what I did, and I don't have to go back to the beginning, right? So there's save points, sometimes multiple ones in every room. And then, having an RPG element to it is only going to make, the rest of the combat work well, because Some monsters are going to hit you softer, and some are going to hit you harder, and you need those. You need your shield sometimes, and sometimes you need to take a swig of a potion to heal hit points. So I think if you're an RPG fan, it does have that. And the monsters in the game aren't just bum rushing you all day. I mean, they all have their different ways of attacking and different ways to be defeated. And so that's kind of takes Shadowgate again to the next level. So yeah, I guess that RPG element, is kind of a fun thing where it's just like D&D. When if you played it for the first time or whatever, the basic rules of that. It's super easy to understand. We've got 3 difficulty levels: easy, medium, and hard. And so if you're like 50 some like myself, and you want to play it on easy, you're just going to enjoy a great dungeon thing. If you're 25 and are used to more hardcore games, you can put it on hard, and the mobs are going to be a lot harder. And so we did make it very accessible to anybody that would love to be in a dungeon. You get your own companion named Odin. He's a raven, a one-eyed raven. And super excited. He's a sarcastic British bird, and he will sit there and he follows you around, and you can do a couple things with him. He can give you hints. There's like 3 hint tiers um, to each puzzle, and then he'll also what we call Odin vision. So you can project your mind into Odin. You can see through his one all-seeing eye and discover things that you wouldn't see normally. So you can see traps, you can see hidden things, hidden runes, sometimes hidden monsters. And so it's a really fun play between you and the bird, right? All those kind of things are just very D&D, very fun. So I guess my favorite part is just that I know it sounds trite, but just being inside that world, and just feeling like you're there. And that's, Oculus told me that that's why they approved the game, because that they felt the same thing from, room one on. So
Thank you, Dave, for taking the time to come and chat with me, and to give so much detail on Shadowgate. Like I say, really looking forward to this one. It is right up my alley. Definitely a game I'm looking forward to. So it comes out October 7th. What's the best thing people can do to keep up to date with all the latest news?
yeah, so I'll be updating the Zojoi website, which is zojoi.com, or you can type in shadowgatevr.com or shadowgate.com, and it'll take you to the same site, or mythrock.com or mines of mythrock.com. But yeah, I'll be updating that. You can join the Shadowgate Facebook group, which is always a fun place. But we'll be we'll be contacting a lot more of the media, just let them know that it's coming out, and people like yourself get a chance to play it, and hopefully do some reviews for it. But yeah, I would say just you can just there's a newsletter you can sign up for on Zojoi, but yeah.
Well, I'll link all of those things in the description below. Always feel the need to do that when I say description below. And that will all be there. So if you want to check those websites and resources out, then just check the description. Thanks again, Dave, for taking the time. Are there any last words before we wrap this up?
I guess only that it's a sad thing that your adventures have ended here.